Welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels recommended by you. Hi, I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
And I'm Lauren. This month we read The Three-Body Problem by Lu Xun.
Lu Xun is a Chinese computer engineer and science fiction writer. He is a 9-time winner of China's Galaxy Award and has also received the 2015 Hugo Award for this novel, The Three-Body Problem, as well as the 2017 Locus Award for Death's End. He is also a winner of the Chinese Nebula Award. In English translations of his works, his name is given as Cixin Liu. He is a member of China Science Writers Association and the vice president of Shanxi Writers Association. Barbara, you want to tell us a little about the book itself?
Yeah, so this was originally published on May 1st, 2006 in China, and then it was later translated in November 11th, 2014 for the American audience, or English. I'm not sure about the other languages. The genre is considered science fiction, and yes, boy, is it. It is 399 pages, and it currently has a 4.1 on Goodreads, 4.3 on Barnes & Noble's, 4.3 on Amazon, and 4.4 on Audible. It has been nominated for the Nebula Award for Best Novel in 2014, Locus Award for Best Science Fiction Novel in 2015, the John W. Campbell Memorial Award for Best Science Fiction Novel in 2015, the Prometheus Award for Best Novel of 2015, the Taha Award in 2019, and it has won the Hugo Award for Best Novel in 2015 and the Premio Ignacios for Mejor Novela Extranjera in 2017. We think it's important for readers to know what, if any, representation is in the books we read. So for this book, technically the whole book has POC characters since it is written by a Chinese author with Chinese characters. There are no LGBTQ characters and minor characters with disabilities in the sense of mental health issues.
All right. And Lauren, do you want to tell us a little bit about the story?
Sure. So, set against the backdrop of China's Cultural Revolution, a secret military project sends signals into space to establish contact with aliens. An alien civilization on the brink of destruction captures the signal and plans to invade Earth. Meanwhile, on Earth, different camps start forming, planning to either welcome the superior beings and help them take over a world seen as corrupt, or to fight against the invasion.
And I thought this would be an appropriate time to mention this. So that the person who recommended this book for us to read, before we read it, I asked him, I said, if you had to sell someone on reading this book in a single sentence, what would you say? And his response was a plausible alien invasion from the perspective of communist China. And I think that does kind of sum up.
That's literally it.
The story.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. Thanks for go ahead and typing that in for me prior so that
if the back of the book didn't say there were aliens or alien invasion, all this stuff, that would not have been my first guess until literally it told us in the book, because it's not until very end that you don't really realize that these are aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes it seem like it's another country or another...
Exactly, or something. Like there's something afoot and you're not quite sure what's going on. So I'm curious to know if maybe when this originally came out, he didn't mention the aliens and people are like, WTF, mate, what's going on? And now for the translated people, like in the back of the book, they mention yes, alien invasion. Because I feel like I would have a completely different view of the book going in if I had not known this was an alien invasion.
That's true.
I wonder if there's certain terms in Chinese that allude to that it being extraterrestrial life. Probably. But it doesn't translate.
Yes,
because 100%. I know even with Spanish there's certain words that don't translate to the actual meaning.
Sometimes I'm talking to Michael or my family's talking and he's like, oh, what's that? And I was like, do you want the literal translation, because this is it? And I was like, certain words you just don't have, there's just no translation. That's always the problem with translating.
Yeah, so I wonder if you were a Chinese speaking person reading it, if you were if it wasn't translated or wasn't, I wonder if there's context clues that they have because of the language. So then they just had to make it real clear for us Americans.
It's a really interesting thought, though, because it would be a totally different, if you read this book, imagine the moment you realized it was aliens. If you had no idea, that'd be a huge
yeah.
That's true.
It would be a Star Wars "You're My Father" reference type
but
thing.
Clearly they want you to know since they put it on the back.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They literally wanted you going into this book realizing, hey, there's aliens.
Anyway, what did you guys think about The Three-Body Problem? And remember, no spoilers.
So I thought it was interesting. I thought the overall story was really fascinating, but I had a very hard time with the science fiction aspect of it because I think it was a little too much for me. Like I also didn't think the characters had much of a not a story arc, but like just an arc, an overall arc for them. I thought they were very one-dimensional, kind of flat. There wasn't a huge like, oh, this is my issues, and throughout the whole story we're going to see them like combat that. I think this was definitely a plot driven story and not character driven, and I would have liked to have seen a combo of both or a little bit better of the characterization as well. And I think it's funny because sometimes I gripe on the books where it's just character driven and the plot's kind of on the wayside. So I feel like this is like one of the first books where it's plot driven and not character driven. And I feel the same way. I like the combination of both.
Fair. I love the book. I thought the story was really interesting. I thought that the science behind everything was fascinating, and it was very interesting how I was very impressed how much research he clearly did to put this all together, and learning after reading the book that he's a computer engineer and not just a writer makes a lot more sense because some of the terms and things he was using and the stuff he'd be aware of are in his background already from what he was doing before he was writing books. But yeah, I loved it. I think Barbara did say that as far as the plot is definitely the main thing here. It's not a character driven story. I'll get into that a little bit more in the spoiler section because there's a reason for that, but I don't want to talk about it here. But I think that I really liked it. I thought it was great. I thought the pacing was good, and I'm personally excited to read the rest of the trilogy.
Well, I will not be reading the rest unless, I'm forced to. I didn't hate it. I didn't like it. Okay. I don't know. The plot was definitely interesting, right? I think there was a lot of interesting things, but I also got lost a lot on the math, science, sci-fi specifics surrounding the plot. I'm sure, as usual, which is a hindrance to me, is it probably had something to do with me listening rather than reading. But that's just what I have time for in this stage of life. I sometimes do have a difficult time tracking characters and things when I'm listening in general, but it was extra difficult with this one because it was so complex. The time jumping also was confusing because in the audiobook that I had, I don't know if it was just the version that I listened to, it wasn't really clear when they were jumping time or like what was going on. And so I found myself a lot of times being like, what the hell is happening? Like, what is even going on? And so then I found myself just like tuning things out because I'm like, it's just all the like scientific jargon type stuff that my brain just isn't super interested in. So yeah, I think if this was a book that I was really into, I'd probably go back and reread it in book format, but because I don't think I liked it well enough to invest the time to do that. But yeah, so it was kind of a combination of interesting plot, not interesting enough to like really keep me engaged. So I felt like there's a lot of gaps for me, just probably also contributing to the fact that I listened to it and didn't read it physically.
I didn't even think about the fact that if you're listening to it and the audiobook doesn't make a very distinct cut of like, hey, we're jumping back, that would be really difficult because you have visual cues in books, like visual cues, whereas
I like reading books like that. Yeah. I normally really enjoy reading books that jump around, and I feel like I can't remember which one it was that we read here recently, but it did it like every chapter it said like 10 years ago, and then like it would start out on the audiobook, so I very clearly knew like, okay, we're back in time now, and then like present day, and it would say that. But I feel like sometimes the audiobooks don't read the chapter titles, they just like or the chapter title isn't clear, and so then they just keep like reading the book, which is fine if you are physically looking at it and can see like subtext or whatever. So I think that was difficult for me to that made it even more difficult to track when it was already difficult because of the content.
Yeah, that's definitely a bummer. I didn't realize that. I listened and read this one like I've been doing, but I used Speechify to have like a robot read me the ebook, and when the robot read the ebook, the distinctions that you see in the book were read, so it wasn't as difficult. But there were definitely aspects of it that were not fun to listen to. Like there were parts where I would stop and go, either just stop there, and if I couldn't go grab the book and read it, or I would stop right then and go grab the book and read that section. Like there are whole chapters that are like, it looks like a document, like an interview of two people, like a police document where you see like it would say like Barbara : and then everything she said, and then Lauren : and everything they said, and I couldn't listen to that, so I would go get the book to read it. But so I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I definitely would suggest, if this is a book that you are into, I would definitely suggest reading it physically or doing like Michael did and doing the combo. Because
Oh,
the combo's good. I like the combo.
You won't get confused.
My ass would have been even more confused because I was already confused reading it.
That's mostly how I read these days, is the combo. I feel like I can get more reading done if I listen and actually read.
Once again, I was always hyper on this. I wish I could listen to books, but I do not have the audio capacity to do that. I am a visual person. If I listen to stuff, I just tune it out.
Can you imagine how many books you would get through, Barbara, if you could listen to books instead of listening to your podcast?
I talked to my friend, and she was like, oh, I just casually read like 15 books this month. And I was like, WTF, mate? She's like, oh, I just, pop in the audio and just do things around the house, or like she runs and all this stuff. I was like, I cannot do that. I just do not, my brain does not function that way. And I really wish it did.
I would be so depressed if I couldn't listen to books, because that's literally the only time that I have right now to read. So if I couldn't listen, like, I just wouldn't be reading, and then I would cease to exist.
So like always, we're not going to go into our individual ratings at this part. You have to wait for that to the end. But our group score for this one was a 7 out of 10. So would you recommend this book? Yeah, I think that I would. And I think that, there's definitely would be some caveats, because as both Lauren and Barbara have said in slightly different ways, for them, it was a little too much science and not enough fiction. And if you are someone who is completely like, I don't want to read this, I'm not interested in learning things, I'm not interested in, the hard science, and that's going to bore the crap out of me, then no, like, you can't recommend them this book. Like, for example, like Lauren, our mom enjoys reading. I would not recommend this book to her, and she actually likes sci-fi. It's just, I think it just depends. But like, I have friends who I would absolutely recommend this to. I mean, a friend of mine recommended this to us for the podcast. So to the right reader, absolutely. I loved it.
I'm going to pretend like you didn't say that, this is for people. What did you say? Like, people that want to read and don't want to learn new things. Like, I definitely
Ew, so rude. I didn't want to say anything because apparently I pick on Michael, but I'm glad.
Well, I'm not even picking on Michael. I don't know that he meant to do that, but I would like to put it out there that, like,
your brother. Do you really think I think that was a shot fired on us.
It wasn't an intentional shots fired. I'll stand by my first statement, which I think you both said, that this book was too much science and not enough fiction from a science fiction book for you.
I would agree with that, but I would not agree with the fact that someone who doesn't enjoy this book doesn't like reading books and learning things, because I read a lot of nonfiction to learn things. When I'm reading a fiction book, I'm not trying to learn scientific crap. So I read to learn things, and I enjoy reading to learn things. I'm a very educational person. I like to think I'm pretty intelligent and educated. However, when I'm picking up a fiction book, I don't typically... Now, a fiction book, historical fiction, are there some, like, learning opportunities there? Sure. Did this have some learning opportunities? Yes, but it was too much of the technical piece to be enjoyable for me. So I would not recommend this one to my friend group, just because even my friends, I have friends who like sci-fi, and I think this might be a bit too much for them too. I do have one friend that enjoys Brandon Sanderson, so may recommend this one to her because maybe it's in that vein. But even then, like, I like Brandon Sanderson books better than this one. Yeah. I would read Brandon Sanderson before I would pick up another one of these.
All right, we're going to read The Way of Kings then.
No, we're not, because the good part about this one versus Brandon Sanderson is this one did not feel the need to be 1,100 hours long.
It's a long one. I've been trying to get Barbara to read it for a while. I told her, I keep threatening her, I'm going to get somebody to recommend it.
I have commitment issues, so no.
I would recommend this one. I think I would recommend it to people that are super, super sci-fi. And I would, even my people that like sci-fi, I think I would give the caveat of, like, just so you know, it's very technical. Like, it's got a lot of, like, math and science and technical stuff. And if you're not, and I would definitely say don't listen. I would say read it if you can, or do a combo like you did, just because I think that I might have enjoyed it more if I was able to physically read it. Now, I'm not saying it would have been my favorite book, but it might have been less confusing.
Yeah, pretty much what you guys said. I think if you love sci-fi books, you'll love this. It's great for sci-fi lovers. I think maybe even people who enjoy sci-fi a little, but for casual fans like myself, I think it feels that they'll feel a little lost at times, like I did. I enjoy sci-fi, but it's not like I'm not like Michael, who's like that's my preference of the genre.
For those of you leaving us at this point, don't forget to give us a rating if you like us, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. In both places, our handle is at Badass Lit Pod. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got a book you want us to read on the show, let us know. Now, Lauren is going to give us a short preview of our next episode. Next month, we are reading The Water Tower by Amy Young. Now for a short preview of our next episode. Next month, we are reading The Water Tower by Amy Young. Special thank you to Lisa from Swell Media for an advance copy of the book.
Josie Ashbury was a successful Hollywood actress with a booming career until an on-set breakdown sends her back to her small Ohio hometown to recover. Taking a job teaching at her old high school, Josie is beginning to put the pieces of her life back together when one of her students dies under suspicious circumstances. The police close the case quickly without any real answers. Josie is determined to find the truth behind the girl's death. At the same time, Josie is battling demons of her own. As she faces debilitating insomnia that leaves her with gaps in her memory, she dives into the tangled secrets surrounding the investigation. When she finally unravels the web, she discovers that the truth lies much closer to home than she could have ever imagined.
Remember, the second part of this episode is an in-depth look at the three-body problem, so if you do want to read it, stop listening right now and come back when you're done.
My bulky blender was such a pain to use, I ended up hardly ever using it at all. But the BlendJet 2 portable blender makes blending so easy and convenient, I use it just about every day. BlendJet 2 is portable, so you can blend up a smoothie at work, a protein shake at the gym, or even a margarita at the beach. It's small enough to fit in a cup holder, but powerful enough to blast through tough ingredients like ice and frozen fruit with ease. BlendJet 2 is whisper quiet, so you can make your morning smoothie without waking up the whole house. It lasts for 15 plus blends and recharges quickly via USB-C. Best of all, BlendJet 2 cleans itself. Just blend water with a drop of soap and you're good to go. With over 30 plus colors and patterns to choose from, there's a BlendJet 2 to complement just about any style. I rock the ruby metallic print myself because I'm clearly a certified badass. What are you waiting for? Go to blendjet.com and grab yours today, and be sure to use the promo code BADALITPOD12. That's BADALITPOD12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. No other portable blender on the market comes close to the quality, power, and innovation of the BlendJet 2. They guarantee you'll love it or your money back. Blend anytime, anywhere with the BlendJet 2 portable blender. Go to blendjet.com and use the code BADALITPOD12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. Shop today and get the best deal ever.
It is critically important to stay hydrated. I know I'm always trying to be better about drinking more water. Well, I've got a product that helps you stay hydrated. Liquid IV is the category-winning hydration brand fueling your well-being, and their hydration multiplier is the one product you're missing in your daily routine. In just one stick, you get 5 essential vitamins and 2 times faster hydration than water alone. Use it first thing in the morning, before a workout, when you feel run down, after a long night out, or even on long flights. It's festival season, and planning for faster, efficient hydration is essential. Liquid IV has you covered while you prep before, power through to the headliner, and recover after the weekend. Liquid IV hydrates 2 times faster than water alone and 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. What I love most about Liquid IV is that it's super easy to take with you, and personally I love the strawberry flavor, but all the ones that I've tried are pretty great. Also, it's made with premium ingredients. It's non-GMO, and it's free from gluten, dairy, and soy. And the company does some really cool things, too. Liquid IV believes that equitable access to clean and abundant water is the foundation of a healthier world. They partner with leading organizations for innovative solutions to help communities protect both their water and their futures. To date, Liquid IV has donated over 39 million servings in 50-plus countries around the world. Get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use our special code BADASS at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using our special promo code BADASS, all one word, at liquidiv.com. Now, for those of you sticking around for the spoilers, here we go. So like always, we're going to start off with who gets the Badass Character Award. Barbara, who is your nominee for the 3-body problem?
Yeah, this was hard. because I don't think anyone really fits this for me in the scheme of things. But if I had to pick, it would be Dashi or Shi Kyung, which is like his real name technically, but his nickname was Dashi. But anyways, but yes, it would be him.
So I don't agree with. I mean, Dashi is a badass, and he was a very entertaining character, and I'm excited to talk about him in a little bit. But the person that I picked for this was Wang Miao, who is, I would argue, possibly the main character of the book. And I picked him for this because he, and if you're still listening and you're not wanting to spoil, it's about to give big spoilers. So I picked him because he developed, or he was the leader of the team that developed the nanoparticles that they use at the end of the book to literally like cut a massive freighter into tiny little pieces by hanging a near invisible net in front of it, which was just really freaking cool to me. So that's why I picked Wang Miao.
Michael likes murder, so makes sense.
Michael likes cool science invention stuff.
Murder.
Yes, and murder.
Lauren and Barbara are the ones who like murder. Actually,
that's accurate. I won't.
Let's look at the history of this
so
podcast.
I like death. There's a difference between death and murder. So
Barbara likes serial killers. I also want to point that out.
Yeah,
but I do too. So
I'm not the one who listens to serial killer podcasts like you do, Michael.
I
so.
feel
I listen to true crime podcasts, not
same thing. I don't listen to any of that shit.
I like true crime too, but I feel like we should also put like a caveat around this. We like to listen to and consume media around murder and death. We do not like murder and death.
Meanwhile, Barbara is one of the active serial killers in our country. If the FBI is listening, no, I'm just kidding.
Wow. I swear, if I get in trouble for this, Michael.
I also don't know that I would choose a badass character, honestly. I will agree with Barbara and pick Dashi just because that was the best one that I could think of.
Yeah. We win.
I mean, I don't disagree. I think Dashi is a really cool character, and he is definitely a badass. He's a very unique character in a book that's full of like engineers and physicists and that type of personality.
He
stands out.
Like me, is just like, you know what? We're just going to not understand this.
So let's talk about a quick rundown of the characters. This book had a pretty large cast of characters, so we're obviously not going to touch on every single one. And I think you would agree with me when I say that this book didn't really have like a quote unquote main character. Every section of the book has a main character, but with the time jumps and stuff, I think that there were multiple characters that I would consider like the main.
I would say there's two main characters because that's the two that we follow.
Wenjie and Wang Miao, I assume, are the two you're considering.
Correct. Yeah. Because this is third person, so it's not first person. It is third person perspective, but we only get to see their perspective. Nobody else's.
That's true.
Well, and then a little bit of the alien people, but outside of that,
we'll get to that later. Yeah. Right. So that's probably right. I would agree that Wenjie and Wang Miao are the two main characters. Okay, so the first character that I want to talk about is Wenjie, who's clearly one of the main characters in the book, like we just said. She is an astrophysicist, and she is kind of the antagonist in the book, I would say, a little bit.
Yeah.
So she had a pretty messed up life.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, pretty messed up life. Her parents were both also scientists and were both murdered. Mm-hmm. Her dad was murdered. Mom initiated the murder. It's a very complicated thing, but yeah, she had a really messed up childhood. She is working at this Red Coast base, and she is part of the team that is trying to hopefully, get in contact.
Tried for treason, pretty much, even though she didn't do anything wrong. This dude did, and then she got put on the space because they thought that would be safer than.
Well, I think they didn't want to waste her knowledge either.
Sure, that's what I'm saying. They didn't want to waste her knowledge, but they didn't think it was safe for her to go out because of quote unquote the treason that she did, quote unquote.
Right. So, if I remember right, didn't they say like it's prison or this? But if you do this, you can never leave, kind of a thing. Correct. Like it's still prison, but you get to do interesting things.
Correct.
So anyway, she's doing that. She is the first person to successfully establish contact with the Tri-Solarans, who are the alien race in the book that are going to try to invade while working at the base. She has had a husband. She had a husband that she killed, and she has a daughter as well. And she also became the spiritual leader of the ETO, which is one of the sects that kind of establishes once people start to figure out that these aliens are coming. And that particular sect is more of the pro-alien. I would say they're pro-alien, pro-environment. Because if I remember right, they're also in like an environmental group.
Correct.
And
I
yeah,
mean, that's the whole reason why they want the Trisolarians to come to Earth, because they believe that the humans have messed up and they want to reset, essentially.
Yeah, she's pretty much anti-human. And so
Yes.
in that sense, like the message that, so she sends the message, the aliens respond and say, hey, don't say anything else. Please don't, like, they're going to come to you. Please don't do that. And she's like, I hate people. We need this. And so she responds anyway. And that triggers the entire.
And I believe, from what I understood, it's because of everything that happened, like, to her dad and how she was treated. And then when she had her daughter, it was a very interesting part where it said, like, a part of her heart melted or grew. It was kind of like the Grinch aspect. Like, that's kind of how I pictured it. And then she went and talked to the women who essentially murdered her father, and they were like, oh, we're insignificant now, or like, no one cares about us, and like, sorry but not sorry type thing. And then she was like, you know what, I did the right thing with these alien invasion type thing. It's like, oof.
Yeah.
So that's her in a nutshell.
And two other characters I want to touch on briefly connected to her are Lei Zisheng and Yang Wenying. Yang is her husband that she meets at the base. He was a student of her father, I think, and they end up getting married. But the only reason I want to mention him and Lei is Lei also works at the base, and Ye Wenjie decides she needs to kill him.
Say her first name or her last name. You can pick. You don't have to do both. You don't do that with American people, Michael.
True. Ye decides that she needs to kill this person, and unfortunately when she kills him, she also has to kill her husband because of the environment. So that's the only reason I wanted to mention them, because she murders two people at the base to keep them from finding out that she's contacted aliens,
one of which is her husband.
One of which is her husband, because he happens to show up. Unfortunately, he wasn't part of the plan. But anyway, Barbara, do you want to talk about our other main character from the present?
Wang is as Michael said, a nanomaterials researcher, and I feel like outside of Wenjie, he is the other main character, because he's the one that for the bulk, I would say, outside of Wenjie's point of view, he's the one that we follow. And he gets contacted by these people. He works for the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and they're investigating this ETO group, and they don't tell him any of this moving forward. They just kind of like, hey, we need your help. They don't tell him that's an alien invasion. They don't tell him anything. So he goes throughout the book, like, figuring these things out, and things happen to him, like these creepy things, like numbers pop up on his vision, and he's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And his whole world gets rattled because of this. One of the characters that he meets in the ETO group is someone who tells him to play this online video game or computer game, whatever you want to call it, called Three Body Problem. And this is where I really, I was extremely fascinated with this aspect of the book, because he goes into this virtual reality. So think of like Ready Player One, where like you wear like this full body thing and you can feel the things and you can see the things. And he plays this game, and they're trying to figure out how to solve this three body problem. And as a reader, you I feel like it was pretty obvious. It's like, how to save this. It's the alien group. You're essentially living through their life and try to figure out how to save their planet. And that's pretty much him. And then he kind of figures everything out, helps them figure it out. Like Michael mentioned, he's the one who had his nanotechnology cut the ship in half so they can get the information they need without telling people about it and all that jazz. And so that's him, kind of in a long-winded explanation.
I don't think that was a long-winded. I mean, he's the one of the major characters. Lauren, do you want to talk about Yang Dong, or do you want me to talk about Yang Dong?
I'll let you talk about Yang Dong, other than just to say that I'll let you talk about it.
Okay. So Yang Dong is the daughter of Ye, and she is also a string theorist. She's introduced to us in the book because she is she's a friend of Wang's, and we find out early on that she commits suicide. She's actually not present for any of the present day portion of the novel because she's already killed herself.
I mean, all these scientists are committing suicide, and they're
Correct.
trying to figure out like what is going on and why they are.
That's actually why Wang gets recruited by the
Correct.
government, is
they were
to
worried that he would be next.
Infiltrate this group and figure out why scientists are all taking their own lives. But yeah, Yang Dong is Ye's daughter, friend of Wang's, and we actually get more like screen time with her husband, whose name is Ding Yi. He's also a theoretical physicist, and he and Wang kind of connect at the beginning of the book when Wang's trying to figure out why like the reason that his friend Yang took her own life when it didn't seem like she seemed fine the last time they saw each other and all that. So that's why. And there's a really interesting scene with him where they have they kind of explain the whole theoretical physics, and the reason that all these scientists are kind of losing their mind is that as part of this thing that they're learning in the three-body problem is that physics essentially is wrong. And so these scientists that have been spending their entire lives and dedicated hours and years of their life to physics and the furthering of that science find out one morning that they were wrong. It's wrong. It's all BS. And some of them, the implication is some of them couldn't take it. And that's kind of what's happened. So that's who Yang is. And then that's also who Ding Yi is. I am going to let Barbara talk about Shi Qiang because she did pick him, Dashi, as her badass character choice.
Yeah, so he is the police detective and counterterrorism specialist, nicknamed Dashi. He is really good at reading people. That's why he's really, really good at his job, because he can literally just look at a person and know a lot about them. And I thought that was a really interesting aspect. He's the only non-scientist person out of the group. He kind of helps Wang out when I feel like Wang was having an extra... I can't say the word. What is it? A crisis? He was having a crisis after he saw the numbers in the photographs, and he was like, hey, we can figure this out. He's also the one who came up with the idea for taking the information back from the ship without ruining the information or having them realize what they're doing. He's a very smart person. It's just he doesn't have the science knowledge. I think I enjoyed his character the most just because he seemed very three-dimensional. He had his faults. He was kind of abrasive, kind of a crass person, but for the well-being of the good and all that stuff, you can see why he does the things that he does and why he's so good at the stuff that he does. There was a police thing that they bartered in on the ETO group, and he knew exactly who to talk to and who to de-escalate the situation. It was just really neat to watch him do that. And he also does that with quite a few people. When Wang and Dean were having these issues where they're drinking, they're like, oh, the aliens are coming, there's nothing we can do. And then he mentions yes, actually there is A, B, and C. So I just liked his point of view.
Yeah, he was super interesting character and very entertaining. I definitely agree with that. We talked about him a little bit. For those of you who listened to our literary dinner bonus episode, he was one of our guests at the table. Let's see. So the next person we're going to talk about is Wei Cheng, who is a math prodigy and also kind of a recluse. He develops, and he's not a major character in the story, but he's very important because he is the person who ends up coming up with the possible solution for the three-body problem inside the video game. And last but not least, Barbara, do you want to quickly talk about who Mike Evans is?
Yeah, Mike is just the person that Wenjie meets later in life, that he's this billionaire's son, which is ironic because his dad is an oil tycoon type person, and he's very into the environment and trying to replant these trees because he says F humans because we're destroying the world. He's that guy. And they kind of meet each other because they both feel the same way. Hers is a little different because she's F humans because we're just awful humans. He's F humans because of the environment. They band together. She tells him
hey,
I contact these aliens, they're coming. And so he's the one that funds essentially what becomes the ETO, which is the alien invasion, loving people. So that's just him. He kind of helped the whole process or movement move.
Yeah. A critical person or a critical member of the ETO, which I looked that up because I couldn't remember. It's the Earth Trisolaris Organization.
That's right.
They're the group that's pro-Trisolaran.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's such a short list, genuinely a short list of the characters. This book has a huge cast of characters. Moving on to our questions, though, what did you think of the writing style and content structure of the book?
So I had a bit of trouble in the beginning with the amount of metaphors the book had, especially in the first 2 or 3 chapters. And I even griped at Michael because I don't mind metaphors. I enjoy metaphors. But when it's just one thing after another, it really starts grating on my nerves, which is funny because I think it's probably one of those things. It's a translation thing, so who knows if this is really how the book is. But regardless, it dropped off significantly later on in the book, and it wasn't as distracting. And that's the right amount for me for metaphor, so I enjoyed that. As for the time jumps in the transcripts of conversations, I don't have a problem with that. I actually enjoy those. I don't think it detracts from the storytelling for me. I enjoy the different perspectives of time jumping, so you kind of get a full, large picture of what's going on. I do like that. So I didn't really have a problem with quote unquote the writing style or content of the book.
I really enjoyed the writing style and the content structure. I think that the pacing was good too. There wasn't like some books like this have slow periods, and the only ones that I would consider were slower were the sections that Barbara and Lauren are probably going to mention. There were too sciencey and too like lots of like info dump about the facts and behind the science, and it was very interesting for me, obviously. But I still like it's when you're reading a book that you're reading for leisure and you get to a point where you're reading, it feels like 6 paragraphs that belong in like a textbook for whatever field they're talking about at that time. It definitely slows the pace down a little bit, but I'm not going to totally knock it because I did find it really interesting. It was just those sections I had to, when I got there, I'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I have to quickly like stop listening if I was listening to switch over to the book. Cause I feel like when it's that kind of information, it absorb that better reading than I can with a story, if that makes sense. But like Barbara said, the time jumps were fine. The transcripts of conversations, I think it's really neat when authors incorporate different ways of storytelling into their books. Like we've had other books we've read where it's like diary entries, and we've had other books that are like this, where it's like a transcript of a conversation. And I think that for this book, at least, it was interesting because it almost makes you feel like a character in the story that's being handed these copies of events that have happened, and so it's a unique way to involve the reader in the story, and I thought it was pretty cool.
So I think this one was more of just a listening issue for me. I didn't care for the style of writing, but I think it's more because of the audiobook version that I read, because it was difficult to keep track of what was going on, where we were at in time, who was talking, all of those sorts of things. I normally, like Barbara had mentioned, like I really like time jumps, character jumps, things like that, perspective changes. For some reason I didn't for this one, and I think it's mainly my fault for the audiobook's fault for not being more clear, and then my fault for just not being able to physically read it.
Yeah, that's definitely a bummer to hear that the audiobook was made this more difficult to read.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like that's something audiobooks should consider.
Audiobooks, you're supposed to be removing barriers. No.
Right.
I'm actually, I'm really surprised. The reason I'm so surprised is that generally, so like I mentioned at the beginning, like a lot of times when I do listen, because I don't want to buy the audiobook, I use Speechify, which I already have to read the transcription for me. And I generally think that I would think that would be worse, right? Like having a non-human read the book to you should be worse than having a human read it to you, because if humans reading it to you, you'd think they'd adapt it to make it more understandable for a listening audience. So that's a bummer.
And for most audiobooks, they do a really good job of it, but some of them just don't.
Yeah, I was gonna say it depends on the company. Like if they're a small audiobook company, maybe that's not something they thought about.
True. And I guess this could be, since this book is kind of, I mean, it's been big for a while, but it's having a resurgence because of the Netflix series that's coming out later this year. Maybe they'll go through and redo the audiobook too. That could be
Amazon.
No, it's Netflix. The book initially jumps across various intervals of time, 2 different points in the Cultural Revolution, and then into the present day with a completely different point of view character. Also, the initial half of the book often seems to be introducing various events that have little to do with one another, like Barbara mentioned, until the lines are drawn to connect them up later in the novel. Did you enjoy these skips in time, or did you find them jarring? So I think my answer is kind of both. They were very jarring. And in the first part of the book, when there's these events that don't really seem to be connected, like the question said, and you're trying to figure out how this happens, it was very jarring. And it was the hard cut from this event to this event was very jarring. And it was a little frustrating at the time. I think, though, that in the end, like when I got to the end of the novel and I had been able to connect the dots, and, I'm Charlie Day and that famous meme where he's standing in front of the board with all the red yarn. I really liked the way that they did it, or the way the author did it, because I think that the jarring jumps at the beginning I think they were intentional, and I think that it was supposed to be a little bit jarring, and I think part of that is just the structure of how he wrote the book to kind of force the reader to think critically and connect the dots. It's not a book that at that point, like the question says in the first half of the novel, it's not laying that out for you. It's not holding your hand. It's just giving you this information, and you have to be, as the reader, have to be kind of like the detective that pieces everything together, which was interesting. And as listeners know, I'm not particularly good at always making those connections. So it was good. I thought I liked it. I found them jarring, but I think that was a good thing.
Yeah, I won't harp on the audiobook thing because it's my own fault, but it was jarring just mainly because of that. I was definitely super confused for like the entire first half of the book. Actually, like a lot of the whole book, but it did finally start to make more sense about halfway through, as like Michael, you said the lines were connecting, but they were also, it was a lot harder to connect. It would be like me with the same meme trying to connect the dots, but like not actually having like the push pins.
I haven't solved anything.
She has no. What I just envisioned when she said that is like she's got this yarn and no push pin, so she's like connecting it, and then the yarn just falls to the ground.
That's exactly.
She draws another one, and it falls to the ground.
That's exactly how it felt. Like as soon as I felt like I had a good handle on what was going on, then I'm like, I would read another or listen to another chapter and be like, well, I guess that was wrong. Like, never mind.
I didn't find it jarring. I don't have problems with that stuff, I guess. I don't know. I enjoy books done this way, and I think he actually did a really good job of it all, and I enjoyed the connecting the threads. I enjoyed all of it. My only issue is the beginning of the book. I didn't feel any sort of connection for Wenjie's father, and that's what we start off with. So I understand why those scenes and chapters were in the book, because, you know, that's the start of her hate for the human race. But I felt really disconnected to it because it was like the first thing that we're introduced. I was under the impression that he was the main character. He dies really quick, and I'm just like, okay, so like, what was the point of that? And then it's like, oh, here's his daughter. Then I understood it. I just feel like if we had met her first and then had that flashed back to us, even after like a chapter or two of getting to know her when she is in her chopping down trees era, you know, that would have been fine. I feel like it would have had more of an impact to me as a reader. But as it sits, it's a brutal opening, really, really brutal opening, very interesting opening. But I just felt a little blasé towards it just because I was like, why do I need to know this? And then when I figured out why I did, maybe that's like he wanted the shock value of it. I just feel like it maybe should have been moved to a different section of the book. I feel like for a book, it doesn't do it for me, but for a TV movie, or not TV movie, TV series or movie, that's the opening you want to get. So I'm like, I think that is a great opening for that medium, not so much for a book.
So moving on from there, the novel explores the theme of human nature and the choices individuals make when faced with existential threats. How do the characters in the book respond to the impending invasion? And do you think their actions are realistic and reflective of human nature?
I felt like it was definitely an appropriate comparison to human nature. I think it's crazy when they started talking about like crafting miracles to try to get the scientific community to start believing in God, which was just, I don't know, interesting perspective to see that. I think, you know, when people it did a good job of showing how different types of personalities of people deal with existential threats. I think we kind of got a good balance between like people that remain rational and then people that don't. And yeah, I mean, I think we kind of got to see it from multiple perspectives. So I think that part was well done.
So it was interesting to see subgroups of the people. I think it's interesting because we have people who are starkly against the alien invasion, people who see them as literal gods, and ones that just want to get on their good side since they see the invasion as inevitable and want to be on the right side of history, or like the ones who are like, yes, the humans suck. We want the invasion to come, but we still want to be here because we think we're better than the other humans that are destroying the planet, or whatever they may feel about the other parts of the human race. So we want to be within the alien invasion, but we want to be with them and we don't want like us to get destroyed. And I find that extremely fitting and very spot on to how we are as a society, because we have these subgroups of people here too. So I thought that was really interesting and really how we are.
So I don't have a lot more to add from what you guys pretty much covered everything. I think that the way that they responded is in some cases scarily accurate to how humans would respond. I think that they're definitely, like, there realistically would be a group of people that is like, F humans, like, we need this. It's time for a reset. And, it's interesting. And like Lauren mentioned, the religious sect trying to fabricate miracles, ironically using science to get the scientific community to believe in God. I don't know. It was fascinating to see the different groups and what they were willing to do, and it was not surprising in a book written by an engineer that the scientists were the quote unquote good guys, and the religious people were the bad guys.
Yeah.
I also love to see a book where capitalism is the bad guy. It's always fun. Capitalism is definitely an antagonist in this one. When they talk about whenever the West is talked about, it's never positive, and the only American character in the book is also not really shown in a good light, which I guess we'll talk about him a little bit later. But yeah,
Who are you talking about? What American
the colonel, the military guy that comes in at the end.
Well, there's two, because the dude who provided the funding for ETOs.
Oh, yeah. I guess I forgot that he is he American or was he European?
Oh,
he's American.
No, he's British. Sorry.
Yeah, I thought he was. Yeah, he's European. Yeah, British. But yeah, it's interesting. But anyway, yeah, I think that the actions were realistic and reflective, in some cases in a scary manner. So one of the central ideas in the novel is the use of science and technology as both a potential savior and a potential threat to humanity. How does the narrative explore the balance between scientific progress and its consequences? And do you think the book offers any insights or warnings for our own technological advancements?
I think the book does a good job of showing both sides of science and technology. I think there's always a fine line for both. And I think the book depicted this really well, showing both aspects of how, pro and conning both technology and science and human nature and all that jazz. As far as does the book offer insights or warnings, obviously, yes, it does. And for both, because what are they called? The alien Telesolaris?
The Trisolaris.
Trisolaris literally created this thing to stifle technology and science because we were getting too advanced. And so they tripped the scientist people out. And you can see where that kind of hinders us as the human race, because we need this advancement. But it's also interesting to see because, like, the things that they were creating were also to the human nature's detriment as well. So I feel like there is that fine line, that fine balance. And I think the book depicted that extremely well, because we're always towing that as a human nature. Like, we're always towing the line of, like, yes, we created these things. The problem is, how do we use these things that we created? And that's the nature of it. Is we should be creating these things. It's the problem of how do we go about using it that I think is a detriment to us, and that the book showed, not us. I'm talking about the book, the us.
I knew what you meant. So I think the book actually, like Barbara said, did a really good job showing the balance of scientific progress and the consequence of scientific progress, and how tricky it is to walk on that tight or high wire that is like it's a very fine line between the two. And it did a good job showing it. And it also, I think, did a really good job kind of showing how different scientists struggle. Some of them are trying to hold to that line, and they recognize not to lean. They try not to fall the other direction to where it could be bad, and they try to hold it to that. And others are more reckless, and they just want to see the advancement, and they kind of put on their blinders and don't care about what it could potentially mean for everyone if that happens. I think that the book definitely offers insights or warnings. It's obviously, we're not being invaded by aliens, but we do live in a time where the U.S. government just made public that they have encountered a number of UFOs in the last.
We don't call them UFOs anymore.
Sorry, what the unidentified aerial phenomena or something like that.
Mhm.
UAP, I think is what they're called now. But we're at a time where they've openly admitted and declassified that they've seen a bunch of those in the last decades. And, we're also living in a time where artificial intelligence is rapidly becoming better and better. And while that's kind of cool, it's also really scary when you think about what that could potentially mean. And I'm not going to go into that tangent on the podcast, but I think it definitely does. It shows how fine a line it really is between the two things. And I think that Cixin Liu did a really good job with that.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely a good job of showing both sides of the coin. I have said for a while now that I feel like technology and its advancements are really terrifying, just honestly. The fact that we now have the ability with AI to have a robot pass the bar and the medical boards and create completely like fake identities for people, just all of these like insane technological advancements, which I know, my husband is in tech and so are you, Michael. So you guys even like know more than we probably do about that, but obviously there's good things that come from technological advances, like advances in medicine and making people's jobs easier at times, but I'm not sure that the pros outweigh the cons, honestly, of all of that. And I think that the book did a good job of just showing how powerful of a force science and technology are, and then also just like having to, because even when they were fabricating these miracles, it's like they're doing it because like, oh shit, they're advancing too quickly, like we need to slow them down because pretty soon they're going to be able to wipe everybody out, sort of thing. So I don't know, just kind of scary.
Yeah, I feel like a great example of that is Wang and his nanotechnology. Like he was creating it to like use it for A, and then Da Shi uses it to kill, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and like you can create one thing and have it be a good intention, and then
that is right there. I think that was the huge thing in the book where like Wang is having this issue where he's like, I didn't create this technology for how it's being used. I understand, like he understood why it's being used because it's for the greater, quote unquote, the greater good. And that's always been an issue with people, is the greater good. We're doing this for the greater good, but it's still like you're still murdering a lot of people to get that information. And that's where you can see that balance of like, yes, technology, science, and all these things are great, but when we use it for not great reasons, that's where we're having that issue. And I think the book did a great job of that.
That was the perfect example, Barbara, to talk about.
Thank you. Yep. I'm done for the day. Drop the mic.
Because you're absolutely correct, and I think you can apply that to literally any invention that's ever been created. A lot of things were invented with the idea of this being an amazing thing, and you don't think, sometimes anyway, these people don't think about how it can be used for not amazing things.
Nefarious.
Yep, nefarious ways.
Nefarious.
Before I move to this next question, I do want to quickly explain something from the book so that this question makes sense, because we haven't really talked about this. So in the Trisolaran world, which is the planet where the aliens live, and also the three-body problem, the video game that is based on the planet the aliens live in, or live on, sorry, their world is different than ours in the sense that their world goes through eras. They have stable eras and they have chaotic eras. And during stable eras, everything's fine. It's safe. The world is good. And during chaotic eras, it is the sun follows no pattern, and it's almost impossible. Three suns. Then they all happen they're all there at the same time, and they don't follow any predictable pattern as to when this is going to happen, and it's almost impossible to survive these chaos eras.
It's either too hot or too cold.
Correct. And so during this, the Trisolarians must collectively dehydrate and be stored. And that happens during these chaos eras, because if it didn't, then effectively it would just wipe out the entire population. And the implication is that there have been numerous of these eras throughout the planet's history, and there have been a number of times, obviously, before they figured out how to dehydrate people, that like the civilization was just wiped clean when the chaos era came. So anyway, that's my brief footnote about the eras of Trisolaris before we talk about the next question. And here's the question. So considering that another chaotic era could happen at any time, either a natural disaster or a human-made disaster, Why do you think we continue to plan for the future as if it will be much like today? She seems to represent this blinders on attitude towards just continuing to tromp through life one day at a time without worrying where we might be in 10 years. Did you find him frustratingly small-minded or refreshingly basic, or maybe a mixture of the two, and why? It's really interesting, and I think that a lot of times, and even like if you quote unquote the chaotic eras like that, like you could apply that to our planet, and instead of it being this 3 sun phenomenon where the whole planet gets too hot for life, you could talk about the ice ages that the planet Earth has gone through, and the effects that has had on the population of creatures that live here. And you could then talk about how there's maybe another chaotic era, or not maybe, it's definitely, there will be another ice age at some point. And I think what this question is talking about in relation to connecting both the Trisolarian world and our own planet, both in the book and in real life, is that a lot of times there are a lot of people that, like, science says that global warming is a thing, and if we don't do something to slow it down, we're just going to race into another ice age, which doesn't mean that the world is going to cease to exist. It just means that we will. I think that Dashi, who is the police officer in the story, very much does have this attitude where it's like the question says, the blinders on and just move forward, just keep moving forward. Don't focus on, what's going to happen. And I think that can be both. I think it's a mixture of the two. I think it's both frustratingly small-minded, but also it's not refreshingly basic. I don't really like that terminology or that phrase. I think that it's needed at times. And I think that, Barbara mentioned earlier that you actually might have even used the word refreshing. We're talking about his perspective and how he looks at things with his street smarts and his different kind of intelligence, because it's not that he's unintelligent. Barbara and I had a long conversation about this actually outside of the podcast. It's not that he's unintelligent, it's that his intelligence is different. And I think that for him to do his job, which both as part of a story is problem solving and being a detective and trying to infiltrate this secret society of people, he kind of has to have those blinders up, and he has to just focus on the thing that he's doing. And when you read about fictional detectives in literature, or if you talk to real detectives or real people that do this in real life, whether it's detectives or agents or police officers, they talk about this, how like part of it is they have to just put the blinders up and live in that world. And I think that it's required for a character like Dashi, or for a human like Dashi who does what he does. And so that's my answer as to why he is that way. I think it's a mixture of the two.
So I think it's because it's easier to plan for a future that is similar to what you know than to consider the real possibility of it being so drastically different that even if you plan, it's still going to go to shit, or at least hard to plan for. So I think that's why we do what we do as far as putting on the blinders and just heading forward. As for him, I think and I've already mentioned this, but anyways, I think he's a great mixture of both, and why, of all the characters, I liked him the most. Like, he is deliciously flawed. He's got great and awful qualities about him, and that makes him more three-dimensional as a character than the rest of them, where they're very, like Wang, for example, like, he's not a flawed character in the sense, like, he's your golden boy if you think about like heroes in fantasy novels. Like, he's got a great attitude about the human race, he wants to save the human race, he doesn't really go through this, like, I don't even know, this adventure of like, what am I going to do? And it could just be because unfortunately this is a 3-part book, and maybe he will throughout the other 2 books. I don't know, haven't read them, but I think that's why she is that. I don't think he's small-minded or refreshingly basic. I don't think any of that. I think he's a mix of the two because he has to be.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, anytime they have talked about the chaotic era, all I could think about was COVID times, right? Like, wouldn't it have been nice to just like be a dehydrated meat sack during COVID and then like reemerge now when things are like less chaotic? Aside from that, I agree with Barbara. Obviously, it's easier to plan for a future that's similar to the world that you're used to living in. I think that we don't typically think of the fact that like the world could just, I mean, obviously we prepare for changes, right? But not to this extent. And people who constantly plan for the next disaster, like doomsdayers and the like, or have a preoccupation with planning for disasters, are typically diagnosed with mental health conditions in our world. As a therapist, I can attest to that. So it's not like, I feel like if we were walking around just planning for like the next chaotic thing that happens, that's not a healthy place to live in. And then I agreed. I liked the way that Barbara put it, deliciously flawed. Definitely has some good qualities and bad qualities, but it gives his character dimension. So
Deliciously flawed was a nice way to put it. A good, good Barbara-ism.
Is there?
I think so.
I have an isms.
You do. You have there's Barbara-isms. The three-body problem incorporates elements of hard science fiction with detailed scientific explanations and theories. How successful do you think the book is in balancing scientific accuracy with the storytelling? Did the scientific aspects enhance or hinder your enjoyment of the story?
I have no clue if it was accurate because science is definitely not my forte. I felt like it detracted from my enjoyment just because it was so technical and there was so much to keep up with scientifically. I'm sure Michael enjoyed that part. We've already talked about that a little bit. It definitely didn't catch my interest. So I found myself, just like I said earlier, and I've said several times, just kind of tuning it out, not maybe paying as close of attention as I would if I was reading the physical book even. Definitely did not help with my ability to track the plot. Oops.
Yeah, as Lauren said, I also have no idea if it's accurate because I have no idea. You could literally put something on the book and I'd be like, okay, sounds right. Like, I don't know. But I'm going to assume that it is just because everyone said, like, oh, this is so accurate. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it as face value. It was too much for me. It was super distracting, and I found myself just glazing over those parts because I was just uninterested, and it was way over my understanding. I get science, but when you do math and science to this degree, and you're talking about the physicists and all this other stuff, like that's way over my basic college bachelor. Like, I don't know what was going on. So it definitely hindered my enjoyment of the story, especially at the end when we get the Trisolarians chapters and they're explaining their proton. And I was like, OMG, what? Like, why? Like, just get to the why, dear Lord, please. It's cool that they created this proton that effed with the human race. Love that for them. Really, love that for them. Why do I need to know that the first two protons they created made like these creepy like eyeballs and how they created the eyeballs? Like, I don't understand. Just tell me why and let's move on, okay? So, yes, I had a slight issue with clearly.
That part was fascinating.
I mean, sure, it's fascinating. Just say, hey, the first proton we made, you see the creepy eyeballs? Yeah. Oops. Second one, hey, do you see all these things falling on us? Oopsie daisy. You don't have to be like, and then we like sliced it in 2/3 and all this stuff. And I'm just like, oh my God. I felt like I was back in college during my freaking chemistry, and I hated that class because I did not understand.
So I really enjoyed the hard science aspect of the book, like both of you predicted in your notes. As far as how accurate it is, from what I've read outside of the book, it's praised by people that are part of this scientific community for being extremely accurate. I am not going to sit here and pretend that I have PhD, because this is PhD level stuff. And it's very fascinating to read. But
Yes, it is.
It is not something that I had knowledge of before going into this. Now, I think that the book does a really good job balancing the scientific accuracy with the storytelling personally, because I think that it makes everything that's happening that much. How do I want to phrase this? It makes it hit that much harder because it's plausible. It's, it's not, we're not talking about, crazy sci-fi things that are from like hundreds and hundreds of years in the future, like Star Trek, where we've just made these things up. I love Star Trek. So if you're listening to this and you're like, man, Michael doesn't like Star Trek, I love Star Trek. I'm not making fun of it. But it's neat that it's grounded in reality. I think that adds to the fear in the story and confusion, as you're talking about. Like it's like David said in his text when I asked him to describe the thing in one sentence. It's a realistic, like how this would actually play out if this was really happening, and that is really cool. And so for me, the scientific aspects, they enhanced my enjoyment of a story. Now, like I mentioned earlier, there were parts of it where it felt like it was, a page out of a textbook, and that's not a bad thing. It was helpful to understand some of the things they were talking about more. But I can definitely see if for me, someone who's really excited about that, if I had to stop listening and go actually like read that section to absorb it, I can see why, Lauren is talking about how like that totally, like it was over her head and she was listening and it took her out of the story because she tunes out, because it was no longer this fictional thing. It was, I assume anyway, you felt like you were listening to like someone do an audiobook of a textbook for physics or something, right?
It was like a lecture that I was not interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so and I totally get that. And that's a valid criticism. And I think that you're not obviously the only person who's going to feel that way. Take that as you will. But yeah, moving on to the next question. The characters in this novel often grapple with moral and ethical dilemmas. Were there any particular moments or decisions that stood out to you? And how do these moral quandaries shape the characters' journeys as well as the overall narrative?
So I feel like only 2 people fit in this category, and only Wang really faced an ethical dilemma in that his invention, once again, like we mentioned earlier, his invention killed some innocent people for the quote-unquote greater good. He did not create this invention to do that. They used it like this to save the information that they needed from the ship. There were some bad people that they were like, oh, it's okay if they die. But there were also some people who worked on the ship that had no idea what was on the ship. They were just working there, just there being there. And unfortunately, they also died. So you can see, because of this, that he was struggling during this scene. As for Wenjie, who I think is the other person who might have grappled with moral and ethical dilemma, I don't think she even went through a moral dilemma. She didn't even bat an eye in damning the whole human race. Like, girl did not even think twice about it. Like, she had a slight moment where she's like, maybe because of my daughter. And then she's like, JK. So I don't think she was even phased that her daughter's death was kind of essentially her doing. Because, I mean, technically she did realize that the Trisolarans invented this proton that went and effed up with the scientist's mind and their idea of their theories and stuff, because these are hardcore facts, and then you're just kind of blowing them out of the water. Like, you throw the cue ball, it's supposed to land where it's supposed to land, and it was going somewhere else theory. And that's why she essentially killed herself. Like, maybe if we got her point of view when she learned, because we technically don't get that after she learned that it was actually them that caused this issue in the first place. But I feel like because of what we got, she was just like, eh. And it's like, you essentially, your happiness from having a daughter and stuff that you kind of originally felt, you didn't even seem to care that it's kind of your fault that these people killed themselves, one of which was your daughter. So I don't think that she had any issues grappling with ethical issues or morally, because if she did, she would have felt something for what she did, essentially.
I'm going to be honest on this. I don't have a lot to add on top of what you just said. I think you really hit that out of the park. You mentioned that Miao Wang, I think he did face, I think that was a huge ethical dilemma for him because of, like I mentioned earlier, like he's walking that tight wire, the balance between good and bad with science. And I think that he didn't love Dashi's idea of how to use his science. And it was, like you said, a greater good moment. And he had to be convinced by the group of minds and military people that were around that table that it was. And that was definitely a dilemma for him. And I still think in that scene where he's sitting there with the American colonel watching as the boat goes through the Panama Canal and the thing gets cut into slices, Cixin Liu did a really good job of writing that scene from his perspective, where you could feel the discomfort that he felt watching that happen. And it was like his internal monologue of like, I know this has to happen, but like you could just tell he was not comfortable with it happening at the same time, which was really well done. And yeah, I'm not going to add anything on Wenjie. I think Wenjie should have had a lot of moral dilemmas in the book, like when she decided to murder her husband and the other person, or any of the other people that she just freaking killed. But she didn't. Her upbringing, you could argue, is the reason for the way that she is, and she really hates humans, and that's her thing. And so she didn't have any dilemmas in moments that people should have had or would have normally had a moral dilemma. She didn't face that because she was so focused on the thing that she wanted to happen, her end goal. But
yeah, I agree. She gave 0 Fs about her contribution to damning the human race and her daughter. That's a good point too. Just the fact that like didn't really even seem fazed by that, which is strange. And then I feel like they also just did not seem to be bothered at all by conning people to think about like these miracles happening to halt the scientific advancement, which is also messed up. Obviously, some of them, like you talked about, Michael, there was maybe some like hesitation, like knowing, okay, this has to happen, but being, torn about it. But I feel like for the most part, they were all kind of just savage.
Yeah, there was all these people are like, me, we don't care. There's no moral dilemma issues here.
yeah, I mean, her group didn't even face a moral dilemma when they were talking about fabricating miracles to try to get people to believe in their
That's what
God.
I was saying.
Like,
that's what I just said. Yeah, like they had no moral dilemma. They were like, yeah, this is
the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do. Like, no question of like, should we do that? Like,
you've got to also kind of flip that though, because I think that, at least from my perspective, I see it that way because I do not agree with those people in real life or in the book. These people that are so religious and on that side that want to like manipulate other people to believe the things that they believe. And so if you think about it though, in the same way we're saying that Wang was doing something for the greater good, they probably thought they were too. From their perspective and for their belief system, I bet they believed to their core that what they were doing was for the greater good.
There's a fine line between that and batshit crazy.
I agree. 100%. I agree.
mean, and doing
I'm just saying in their heads, that's probably what they're thinking, is that they're...
Yeah, but in this sense, it wasn't for the greater good. It was just for a small group of people who wanted to be with Trisolarians. That is, to me, that is not the greater good. It's not. It's just they want to convert people to this alien gods. And it's like, that's not how this works.
When we consider the greater good, it's all very... it's subjective. Right?
Incredibly.
To who is, because like Dumbledore was doing all that shit he did for the greater good, right? Mm-hmm. And it like totally messed up Harry's whole mental health for like a good 2 years. So,
or all 7 years in school.
Mainly though, the ones where he just like straight like gaslit and ignored him. Like
yes, exactly.
I think, yeah,
but it was for the greater good.
And I think in this book, if you look at every single character, they probably all have a different idea of what the greater good is.
Yeah. I just think the issue I've always had is if you remove my choice of me picking, that's where I have the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's the ethical dilemma that they just didn't seem to have.
Exactly.
Like,
that's the dilemma they should have run into.
Right. And even if they would have shown like the conversations about like, oh, we understand that this could, like, like just like weighing it and like showing conversations about like, do we want to do it? Here's why we should do it. Here's some cons. Now it's just like, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah. Yep.
And F everybody who gets affected by it.
Yep. Pretty much. Okay, let's move on to our last question. The three-body problem is the first book in a trilogy. Considering the events and themes introduced in this book, what expectations or predictions do you have for the subsequent books? And what unresolved questions or storylines are you most interested in seeing explored further?
Michael, I think you put the emphasis on the wrong syllable in that word.
Did I? Subsequent? I should have said it like that.
Subsequent.
I totally did. Is it subsequent?
You said subsequent. It's subsequent. I mean, maybe it's true the other way, but I've never heard it said subsequent.
So I'm like the worst person to pronounce things, but I've always said a subsequent.
I may be wrong. I'm could be. I have no idea.
Oh no.
But
it's funny.
Anyway.
I don't plan on reading any of the rest of them. I've already said that. So I don't really have any predictions, and I haven't really given this much thought. I think subsequent books probably, I don't know, maybe we'll get more of, the rehydration crap and like maybe some more of like the political kind of conflict. Maybe they'll kind of figure out the ethical and moral dilemmas that some of them ended up in or caused. Maybe we'll see kind of like the aftermath of some of the decisions that they made. But yeah, I will let Michael update me on what happens in subsequent books because I don't plan on reading them.
Fair.
So I guess the second book is probably them just prepping for the invasion, I feel like learning how to deal with the discovery of the proton and how it's affecting their scientists is probably something else they're probably going to touch base on. Maybe how to combat that, the proton that is messing their lives. But mostly I think it's maybe how they're going to deal with the alien invasion, knowing that it's coming. And I have a feeling that it's not going to take them 400 years. Like, obviously something's going to happen. It's probably going to be a lot closer than that. But I guess we'll see. And, how to deal with the people who want this to happen. Because, like, clearly we have, like, quite a lot of subgroups. Like I mentioned, there's, like, 3 or 4, like, the humans who don't agree with them whatsoever. And then the subgroups within the ETO that have differing opinions about the whole thing anyways. As far as did you ask if we're going to be reading the book or not?
I didn't technically, but I'd be curious to know your answer.
I think I liked it enough to want to know more. It's not going to be in my like top list of books to be reading right after. I have a lot, and that does not even broach like the 10 like top 10 for me. I do want to know more about it. I did find it interesting, the plot interesting. I don't really care about the characters as much. So like if we do, go in like 200 years in the future and we don't get to know what happened to these characters, I'm not gonna cry about it because I wasn't really like It's more I'm interested more about the plot. And honestly, I'm digging these aliens because of their dehydration method. Like I too would like to be a
dehydrated meat sack.
Like sometimes when I just don't want to deal with life, I just like, that would be great.
Right. You can just throw some water on me in 6 months when
exactly. And I'm actually really, really excited for the TV series because I'm very curious to know how they're going to do this. Like I think this is more of a TV series for me than a book series. Like I think I might enjoy more watching this than I do reading about this. So maybe TBD as far as like where maybe the TV series might like re-up my fascination for this or not. I do want to know what happens because I'm just one of those people, like I can't, this is the issue I have like reading series books. Like I just need to know. I'm just one of those people I need to know. So
I am going to read something for you really quick, Barbara, because I'm curious if it changes or adds anything to your discussion. So the second book is called The Dark Forest. And just a short little blip about it is Earth is reeling from the revelation of a coming alien invasion 4 centuries in the future. The aliens' human collaborators have been defeated, but the presence of the sophons, which are the subatomic protons we were talking about, that allow the Trisolaris instant access to all of human information, means that Earth's defense plans are exposed to the enemy, and only the human mind remains a secret. This is the motivation for the Wall Facer project, a daring plan that grants 4 men enormous resources to design secret strategies hidden through deceit and misdirection from Earth and Trisolaris alike. 3 of the Wall Facers are influential statesmen and scientists, but the 4th is a total unknown. Luo Ji, an unambitious Chinese astronomer and sociologist, is baffled by his new status. All he knows is he's the only Wall Facer that Trisolaris wants dead.
Okay, so it is like way in the future.
He didn't specifically say that, but it does seem like it's new characters. It's introducing a new cast of characters.
I will watch the TV show and see if I like it any better.
Yeah, that would, yeah. Maybe, like you said, or like I said, maybe you're one like me who prefers watching this versus reading about it.
Well, and I do feel like a lot of it was just the format that I read it in, but I feel like even if I had read a physical book with that much like technical stuff and that much sci-fi stuff, I still feel like I would have skimmed over it. And so I know that the audiobook had like definitely affected it some, but I feel like I still wouldn't have given it a very high rating even if I physically read it, but maybe the movie or the TV series will be better.
So I'm obviously excited to read the rest of the books. I actually already own the second book in the series, so I'll be reading it regardless. I'm also excited for the TV show to see what they do there. it's an interesting thing, because I feel like normally when we have this question where we're talking about like, ooh, what's going to happen next, it's always like, where's this character going to go and what's going to happen with them in the next book. And since it seems like this series is going to have like massive time jumps, so massive that the characters that we introduced and learned about in the first book are probably going to be dead in book 2, and then the characters we learned about in book 2 are probably going to be dead in book 3. It's interesting. And so the thing I'm most interested to see, and this is probably not going to be shocking to either of you, is how the science evolves and what happens and what are the consequences of that. And as the wider human race starts to learn about this happening, what are going to be the implications there? And there's because it's not just going to be like the Earth isn't just going to all band together. Like that's not this is too realistic of a story for it to have like a happy, we're all going to have peace and go against the aliens. Like there's going to be political implications, and I'm interested to see how that goes. We got a little bit of that in this book near the end when you see the different military leaders from different countries coming together to try to stop ETO. But yeah, I mean, I'm super excited to read the book. All right, we got there. Let's do our individual scores for this one. Barbara, what did you give The Three Body Problem?
I gave it a 7. I feel like for all the reasons I've already mentioned before, I'm not going to harpen on, or whatever the saying is, on it.
Harp on. Yeah, that's right.
On. Okay. So, yeah, 7.
I gave it a 9. And same thing. I'm not going to go on because I feel like we've all talked about why we would have given it the score.
And I gave it a 5. I won't harp on why. Everybody already knows.
This is very polarizing, eh?
I think this is the furthest that we've all been apart.
Yeah,
I think it is.
So. I really do think so.
And it ends up with our group average being Barbara. A 7. 7 out of 10.
I am the average human being. Ain't that the truth?
It is not the truth. Make sure you're following Badass Literature for free in your favorite podcast app. Give us a rating and leave us a review if they allow you to. Super important to us. It lets us know how we're doing, and also helps our show get seen by more potential listeners and readers that are interested in joining us on this journey. Also, don't forget to be following us on social media if you're not already. Our username is @BadassLitPod on both Instagram and Facebook.
Have feedback about today's episodes? Contact us by writing to badassliteraturesociety@gmail.com. You can also send us a DM or leave a comment on Instagram or Facebook.
As always, thank you so much for listening. I'm Michael.
I'm Barbara.
I'm Lauren.
Bye.
Bye.